Well, hey everybody, it is Romania Black, and we're on episode 6 of Bloomin' to You. After this episode, we'll be at the halfway point, which is super exciting. There's been lots of things happen between Yuu and Nanami, and we've learned a lot about Maki. We've learned a lot about the sister and the brother, or not the sister and the boyfriend, who could become the future brother-in-law, and they seem totally on board with you and Nanami's relationship, or think that there is a relationship in the wings, even though Yuu is not one to admit it. And I was talking to people in the comments, because now the episodes are getting out on Patreon and YouTube at this point. I really like a lot of people commenting on their own experiences, whether they are on the aro spectrum or asexual or otherwise. I think it's really cool to see that type of representation in the viewership and in the comments as well. Like I said, I identify very much on the asexual spectrum, but I am very romantic, so I am not like you. Not necessarily. I'm similar to her in some regards, but not necessarily akin to her in other ways as well. But I've really come to like these characters and learning about them. Sayaka's the one that we don't fully have all of the information about her. We know that she likes Nanami. It's pretty obvious she likes Nanami, and she's putting up with you the best that she can. Now, we're at the halfway point of the series. Maki's totally on board. Maki is like the male beard. I don't know what the terminology for that is, but he essentially is that for Yuu and Nanami. And then the two friends, like, we know from, Akari. We know from the girl that plays basketball, Akari, that she's had her own boyfriend troubles. Kiyomi is interesting because there's something going on with her in this manuscript that we don't know a whole lot about, but I have a feeling that might come into the latter half. And then, like, Sayaka, we don't know anything truly about her devotion towards Nanami, but I have a feeling that's going to come into play in the second half, because of course there would probably be drama. Why wouldn't there be? And so we'll just have to see where that goes. The only comments I have to talk about are from Sao Tiago. They talk about how this is the mangaka's very first manga, but they actually did Toho doujinshi before this, which I thought was really, really interesting. And I thought that was cool that they still do doujinshi today. I know that the mangaka Forgiven, actually, as I'm wearing this shirt, that mangaka still does like Haikyuu and Kuroko's basketball doujinshi, which is top notch, but only in given format. And I'm like, yes, please. But they do doujinshi as well, which I think is really cool. I think it's neat when professional published mangaka pay homage to their roots and keep it up. I think that's really smart, and I like it a lot. Also, the voice actress for the model in Skip and Loafer, which we're not going to give that away because that'd be spoilers, is also a voice actress in this series. So I thought that was really cool too. So thank you, Santiago, for providing that information. You will not see that for weeks since you posted it, but it's all right. I feel like I'm itching somewhere, and that does not bode well, but all is okay, I guess. So I'm super excited for this episode. After this, we'll be at the halfway point. And, everything seems like it's going okay, even though Yuu is still taking her time and Nanami is being super, super patient and awesome about it. I feel like there's still got to be some conflict. And if it's not going to be with the dad, because he seems like a point of conflict, whether or not he's a red herring or not, we'll find out. But if it's not him, then I think it's going to be Sayaka, or Kiyomi could provide some conflict as well. We'll just have to wait and see. But I want to thank you all so much for all of your support. It means a lot. I'm so excited for this series, and I'm having so much fun with it. So it's become a staple. Like, I'm recording this. You all see it on Fridays on the channel, but usually on Tuesday nights after my night class is over, I get home and I'm like, I want to watch some Bloomin' to You. And so it's become my little tradition to watch on Tuesdays and then post on Fridays. So that's just my little tradition, and I'm super stoked about it. So in any case, we're going to start Bloomin' to You and get into episode 6 and just see where it takes us. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and straighten this out. It's not good, Cotton. It's like, oh, you think you've got this game? You are totally wrong. Just take that. Good thing I have a timer. Otherwise, y'all be like, this timer's not off. And let's go. Oh. Oh, hate those questions, right? Mm. You know it all. Mm. Good job surviving. Oh, yeah, because midterm exams. Ah. Uh-huh. Oh, the same way she looks at me. How would you do that, though, you? Hmm. Interesting. That's interesting to me, too, because Yu's like, I want her to look at the same way. Oh, and Nanami has that portrait. Okay. She has the portrait of maybe her sister. We'll see. He loves me not. Yeah, that's interesting because if you want to give back to someone and show them the same look that they give you, how does one do that? How could you possibly look at her the same way? And maybe the way that you look at her normally is enough for her. Maybe that's why she likes you to begin with. See, we've got to touch base on that. It's like those flowers that wilt as soon as Sayaka reaches for it. It's like it's like doomed Yuri for you. Hmm. I just love this OP. It feels very free run to me for some reason. Which, if you've watched free run, you probably understand. But also, I can't remember, we were talking in the Discord which series it was. If this has the same soundtrack as Natsume or if that's Apothecary Diaries, I can't remember. Oh. Okay, wrap it up. So is Sayaka gonna stay behind and not let them have their moment? Oh yeah, that stage show. Hmm. Oh, could she use Kiyomi's manuscript that she did for the story? Or will they let her double dip like that? Hmm. Okay. Right. Then rehash one. Well, or Kiyomi could write you a script. Yeah. Yeah, Kiyomi's really good at that. Oh, come on. Damn it. What about Kiyomi? And Sayaka was looking at her like, hmm. What's up? Why are you acting all aloof? Yeah, okay. Yes, you do know the perfect person. Ah. So why not ask her? So then why not ask her? Ooh. 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 Oh, and what a apt representation. You live in totally different directions. That's terrifying, actually. And Yu's like, what are you talking about? Uh-huh. Oh, just call her out. What? Yeah, why didn't you say something? Uh, huh. Like she always does. So why didn't you want to tell her about Kiyomi? Is it because you don't? Oh, shit. Oh. Oh my gosh. But of, right. So you not telling her about this. Ooh. Ooh. Oh my gosh. No, that's not it at all. Yeah. Is that her sister? Yeah. Okay. Well, we figured that, but. Oh. You're not going to tell her? Ooh. Oh my god, shit. Oh, that just made it more complicated. Oh no. Oh, well, that's not the answer you want to hear. That's not the answer you want to hear. Oh no. Oh. Nope, not gonna eat. I'm still terrified from that woman. Akari's like, I made her a bento. Mmm. Oh, and the one from them is taken. Of course it is. Crud muffins. Right. So that you couldn't find it. Did she take them away so she'd have to ask her? Or did Nanami take them to do research? Hmm. Oh, she wanted to see if she was going to get to it. Aww. 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 Well, yeah, no, any writer's stressed about their work. Exactly. Understand that. Because you work at a bookstore. Why wouldn't you be? Oh, I love it. That makes so much sense. Ah. Well, I'm not sure yet, but there could be. And of course, why wouldn't you pass up the opportunity to write in a different form? I would love to have her as a student. I would like eat up her work. So now you got to talk to. Right. Hmm. Ooh. No. They've been taken. Well, that's interesting. So why? Yeah, exactly. Clearly something's happened. Did Nanami take them away so she couldn't research it? And Sayaka's gonna make her work for it. Hmm. I wonder what the other conversation was about. Hmm. I love that you have to go through the bookstore to get to their house. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Oh, perfect. So you would probably know. Ask them. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Indirectly. Mio Nanami. Okay. So she wants to be like her sister. Probably. Uh-huh. So what happened? Uh-huh. She said she didn't have any. She die? Mm. Oh, just before it. Oh. Just like what Nanami's trying to be. It was called off. Ah. Wow. That adds a layer to it as well. Of her looking just like her. No. Yeah. They were probably nothing alike. She's put on a front. And the day her sister died, that's when she decided to be like her. Yep. Trying to become what her sister had been. Yeah. Oh, that's so crazy. Oh my gosh. But she didn't want to do whatever play they were doing. She wanted to make it her own. Oh, I love the little crossroads in the middle where, yeah, where she has to pick a side to go on. But yeah, does she really want to do it? Right here in front of Sayaka. Ooh, and Sayaka knows exactly what they're going to talk about. Okay. That damn traffic light. Now that we know their sister died in a traffic accident, I'm going to be terrified every time they cross the train tracks. I'm going to be like, no, let's be careful. Let's not do that. Oh my gosh. Ugh. You just wait until we get close enough so she can split and run afterwards if it doesn't work out. The black cat. Don't be an ominous sign. Ah. Oh! Just come right out and say it. Ooh. Because, yeah, it's been 7 years. Ooh. All the steps. I like that animation. Ooh. Okay, good. Ooh. Ooh. Oh. I mean, that sounds good, but... Oh, that train going by. Oh, say it, damn it! Come on, girl! Come on, girl! Come on! Oh. Ooh. That was cold as shit. Oh. And she looked just like her. Hmm. Wow. All that pressure. That's awful. Oh. For the both of you, not just for yourself. And that outfit was hanging up in her. That's messed up. Oh. 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 Oh, and her just skipping away from her. Oh shit. Oh god. Oh, and the division between the two of them and her moving away. Well, it's not that simple. Mmm. Oh. Oh. Ooh, don't assume too much. Oh. 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 But come on, girl, say something else. Add what you were going to say earlier. Oh. Like, I'm not going to make you choose. Oh, and them coming together like this. Oh my god. Well. Ah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ah. Oh. And I don't want her to leave me. Ah. Ah. Oh, man. Dang. This is a different Edie. Why is this different? Surely we're not changing course at 6 episodes. Maybe there's an after credit scene. Wow, we have a lot to talk about with that conversation. Indeed, indeed. Do I bring my Borkun out? Might have to do that for this episode. Because I love how complex Yuu and Nanami both are. It's really refreshing to see these two, like, working through it and communicating, but at the same time, they're communicating but still keeping some things guarded. I'm sure Sayaka thought that they would just have a fight, or you would overstep her boundaries and they'd break up, and Sayaka was like, oh, sure, you just go talk to her. Have fun with that. Because I'm sure Sayaka has maybe tried to do the same thing and it's backfired on her. I mean, that was the EDs, so... Aww. Bloom into you! Oh, roll credits! Soon it'll bloom into you. Okay. Roll credits, shall we? Oh, we still have an after credit scene. Okay. I was like, maybe? Or do we? A violent word. Ah. Oh. Now we see a little bit more. Yeah, what a win-win situation for you. Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Oh, damn. Oh, damn. No. Oh, my gosh. But, oh, my gosh. Well, it's like not a lot happened in this episode, but a lot happened in this episode. And I was like, oh, okay. Man, I think probably what I love most about this series is how very eloquently and smartly and complexly this series looks at relationships and how we identify ourselves and our personalities. And it brings up all of these ideas about just pointing out how tricky relationships are and how, you know, love isn't... Yuu has this very shoujo, manga-esque, like, this is how love is gonna work, and Nanami kind of comes in here and complicates all of that. And also shows her how it is not so simple, and love and relationships are not as easy as the fairy tales and stories make them out to be. And I really appreciate the kind of realism this series has when it comes to that, because both Nanami and Yu's characters and how we both perceive them as the audience and how they perceive each other through their dialogue and conversation and communication, it is very different. And so, and there's so much that we, the audience, want to like tell each of them, but they don't know. And it's like, it's really good. It's really well done. So my dog's going to be like, you're going to throw this to me now since you've been able to watch the episode. So yeah, let's, they're probably going to chase each other is what it looks like. So if you hear them bark, that's probably why. But I want to go through this episode and talk all about what we deal with it because it's all very, very interesting. So Sayaka rears her ahead in this because Sayaka, this whole time in the wings, I feel like Sayaka, we might as well put her up here off to the side. Sayaka's whole thing is that she has been Nanami's like right-hand person. Nanami's right-hand woman. This whole time. And she believes that she is who Nanami can rely on. She makes that very clear in this episode. I was like, oh, Sayaka is also terrifying. And if I knew someone like Sayaka and she came up to me about someone I liked and had that conversation, would have peed myself. Would have been like, I'm good. I'm going to rethink all this. So she's terrifying as Nanami's best friend because she believes that she's like, oh no, she doesn't need anybody else. I've got this. And I'm like, girl, I don't think Sayaka realizes that part of the reason that Nanami doesn't want you to love her is because of you. And it's like, oh my God. So we need to talk about that. But yeah, so Yu's whole thing is that she wants to figure out, she's aromantic. She also is, in my opinion, on like the asexual spectrum. She doesn't really feel sexual attraction. She doesn't know how that works. But she wants to be able to reciprocate. She wants to be able to reciprocate Nanami's love. She wants to know what love is. She wants to not only know what it's like to be in love, but she's like, Nanami looks at me with such adoration and such devotion and such utter amour. She's like, I want to be able to give that same back to her. Because Yu is a very pragmatic person. She's also very kind, and she also is one that doesn't like taking things. Right? Yu doesn't believe in wanting to take things. She wants to give back. So she feels like, I feel like Yu believes she's being kind of selfish. She's like, I'm letting Nanami love me and I'm not giving anything back to her. And that feels unfair. So she doesn't want to just take. She wants to view love equally in that respect as a give and take, 50% equivalent exchange. Let's do it that way. And she's not bothered. The thing that I like about Yu is that she's not bothered about what other people think of her necessarily. She's not bothered so much. She very much just longs to understand what others feel like when they're in love. And we'll talk about Nanami in that relation later. But she's like, I want her to look the same way that she looks at me. So yeah, we'll get into that. So midterms are over. As you do, and everything's going back to normal, and they're talking about the stage show. And so they admit that they're having problems getting the script written, which they talk about. The old student council asked members from the literature club to write it, but they're only focused on reading. And I like that right now the literature club has become a book club. And they're all like, right? No. We're into literary criticism right now. We're not into rhetoric and comp. So... which is so great because I'm an English major and there's so many different facets of an English major. You can go so many routes with it. I remember being in college and there was the linguistic people over here doing grammar. There was the creative writing people over here. There was the education people over here. There was the technical writers and the rec comp people over here. Then there was the literary studies. Then you had like gender studies. Then you had like, you had so many avenues. Of course, I went to school before there was really like queer studies. Now the college I used to go to has like a queer studies category. Like there's so much. One of my former, I say kids, they're not, they're like 20, but they were on the speech team last year, and now they're at the same college that I went to, and they're studying English as well, but I helped them like get signed up for their classes, and they have so many more options than I did. I was like, what is this? They also had like a student lounge. Anyway, I was like, wow, kids these days. So, but the point is, I think it's really funny that the old literature club now just reads. They don't want to write. That was my English nerd tangent. So I like that Maki's like, well, that sucks. That Maki's response is very much like Zuko from Avatar, where he's like, that's rough, buddy. So they're like, well, we can't find anybody to write it, so we could use one of the old scripts. Now, interestingly enough, I do think that Nanami wants to be herself and go beyond her sister's footsteps. Because if she truly was just wanting to imitate her sister, they would have found one of the old scripts, performed it on, and then just did it that way. But Nanami very much doesn't want to do that. I think it's also important to note that Nanami has taken out all the info on her sister, which you could align as to her possibly replacing her, but I think you could also align it to her not wanting to be compared to her sister. Nanami is a lot more complex in this regard than I had originally thought, which is really cool, but I was like, oh, this goes pretty deep, and so we need to talk about it as we get to this episode. So they don't want to just reuse one of the old scripts. Nanami's like, I want to do something completely original. And so she's like, does anybody know anybody that's good at writing? And so then it's up to you. And Yu's like, well, I can't think of anyone. And Sayaka's like, bitch, you liar. She pulled out the lie detector test, signaled in, figured out that Yu was lying. Yu's not very good at covering it up. And she's like, why aren't you trying to help out Senpai? like, why are you not trying? I feel like Sayaka, in some respects, is a little bit jealous of Yu as well. Because, Yu is clearly withholding information that could help the group out. Sayaka believes this is very important to Nanami. So she's like, why are you not trying to help Nanami? Don't you know how important this is for her? Why aren't you being... And I think that Sayaka's a little bit jealous because she knows that Nanami's not going to get mad at her. Nanami would be like, oh, well. And Sayaka's like, but this is so important to you, and I wouldn't withhold that information. I would be like begging them to write you a draft by now. So I feel like Sayaka's a little bit jealous because she thinks that Yu is deliberately taking for granted Nanami's passion towards this, and that she's not going to get reprimanded for it. And I think that's why she just encourages you to go talk to Nanami about this, because she knows it's a sore subject, and she's like, you might mess up and I might just be the one that has to come rescue Nanami. Oh no. So this all felt like, from this moment on, like Sayaka was like, how dare you withhold information from Nanami? I'm going to teach you a lesson. And that's what this was. And it kind of backfired on Sayaka for now, but I was like, ooh, uh-oh. And so then she's like, well, I got to go take care of something. I left a food in the oven. And Sayaka's like, and I like that Sayaka is particularly not good at hiding when she's about to do something sketch. And she was like, oh, got to go, Nanami, and just looks devoid of all humor. So Yu is like, look, I know the right person. Kiyomi's really good. I could get her to write it. But, I'd actually want to see that show too. And at first I was like, well, you're saying all these great things, like Kiyomi would be perfect. Why wouldn't we want her to write the show? And before she can give us a definitive answer, that's when Sayaka shows up. And Sayaka looks absolutely pissed. Like, looks beyond nonplussed. Like, she's like, well, I want to know what your deal is. She's like, we live in totally different directions. I did not go home with Nanami. That in itself is such symbolism to me, that Sayaka and Nanami live in polar opposite directions. I feel like they're on very different wavelengths, and Sayaka doesn't quite realize how different of wavelengths they really are on at the moment, right? But she's like, I wanted to talk with you anyway, and Yu's like, oh no. And she's like, did you write that manuscript? She's like, no, I had a friend write it. And she's like, oh, it was good. And she's like, oh, so you knew someone that could write our script, but you kept it a secret from earlier. And you was like, this is so awkward. And man, she's like, oh, well, we're not going to pressure anyone into it. She's like, I just want to know, are you worried about Nanami? And Yu's like, well, what reason would I have to worry about her? And she's willing to do whatever it takes, even being the lead actress. So we should be fine. She's like, well, that's true. Nanami is capable of putting on a flawless performance like she always does. And that's when Yu says, as if. And she says, do you think I was gullible enough to buy that? I was like, at that point, if I was you, I would be shaking in my boots. I'd be like, oh shit, this woman's terrifying. Ha, she would go yandere for Nanami. I have no doubts. And then he was like, who, me? And Yu does a very good job of kind of playing innocent. And I feel for you because on some regards, she is very naive and she doesn't know everything that Sayaka does. But if I was on Sayaka's end, I'd be like, oh, that innocent act. No. Let's get to this. She's like, I'm by her side. I know everything. And I'm like, well, do you know that you and her have been making out? Do you know that? Do you know more than Maki? He might question that. And so she's like, Toko constantly puts up a front of strength and confidence, but she deals with a lot of pressure from being on the council, which is true. But that's what she wants. Now, the moment she says that's what she wants, we see Nanami looking kind of sad. So it's more complex. Nanami, she wants to imitate her sister because she wants she wants the results, but she does know that she is acting and putting on a front. She's fine with that, but anytime anybody is like that, there's going to be some melancholy. There's going to be some regret. There's going to be some sadness because you're like, I can't totally fully be myself because of X, Y, and Z. And I do agree with you in the sense that if you aren't totally comfortable with that, or if you don't have an outlet where you can be yourself, that could really turn toxic and it could really be a detriment later on, right? So she needs a place or an avenue where she can be herself and not have to worry about that. This story is a Donmai. This is Heaven Official's Blessing. And I'm going to talk about it in a hot second. So Heaven Official's Blessing, anytime I wave my arm like this, I'm going to be doing Heaven Official's Blessing spoilers. And then when I wave it again, it's going to mean that I'm done with those spoilers. But what this reminds me of is, and we're going to come back to it later when we get to that whole, the stones and the stones across the river or whatever. But Nanami reminds me so much, Heaven Official's Blessing spoilers, of Hua Chong. And in Heaven Official's Blessing, Hua Chong's character, he puts up a front where he's this powerful, super powerful ghost king that's perfect, that has no flaws or whatever, and he has all of this power and everything. In reality, he feels extremely insecure. He thinks that he's ugly. He thinks nobody's going to like him, especially the person he loves the most. He thinks they're not going to like him at all, and anything he does is possibly going to ruin their relationship. So he has a lot of insecurities, but he puts on this front of being flawless and to do it to gain power and be able to use it whenever he wants to. The thing of it is, in that series, because he's in a relationship with Shi Lian loves him no matter what two sides he shows, the demon side or the child, that's trying to reclaim its entire life that it's lost side. And Shi Lian doesn't judge him. He accepts him. He loves him for who he is, regardless, and doesn't view him as a monster. And because of that, because Hua Chong can be himself around Shi Lian and not worry about being judged, he can still put on the persona. He can still put on the front around everyone else. It just makes his relationship with Shi Lian even stronger and more vital to his existence because Shi Lian's the one person he can be himself around. And in that series, there is no questioning Shelian ever leaving him. That's not even on the table. That's not even an option. So, end of heaven officials blessing, spoilers for now. But Nanami reminds me a lot of them because she likes what the results are of performing this persona is. She likes it, even though she seems like a little bit like, oh, this isn't really me. I'm not really into this, but I'm doing it because I like the results. But she also needs someone that she can bounce off of and be herself around to not have to worry about that. And that's kind of where Yuu comes in. And we'll come back to that later on. But Sayaka's like, that's what she wants. And so being the student council and doing the stage show, those are things that she decided for herself. And you're going to ignore the fact and just stand in her way. Like, Sayaka is worried that Yuu is going to hold Nanami back or make her sad. She's like, Nanami decided all this. She didn't have to bring up the stage show. She didn't have to bring up anything. It wasn't brought up before. She's the one that decided it, so it's clearly something she wants, so we should support her no matter what. And you're standing in her way. And Yu's like, well, I'm just, being concerned. And I like that Yu kind of looks down at the manuscript. She's like, well, but why do we have to do the stage show? And Sayaka's like, well, the student council president from 7 years ago. And she's like, that's the reason why she's so wrapped up in it. And then I like that Nanami's like, why don't you go find out for yourself? Why don't you go do some research? She's like, I know, because I'm in the know. You need to go do some research and figure it out yourself. And I like that Sayaka, she's like, well, don't you have any worries about Nanami? And she's like, well, there's nothing for you to worry about, because she's got me to look after her. And Yu's like, what? I just love Yu's expression, like, oh, shit. Because basically what Sayaka is saying is Sayaka's like, oh, don't worry. If you break Nanami's heart and you end up breaking her heart and making her upset, I'll be here to come support her. I'll be her safety net. Once you're gone, I'll still be here. And it's like, and the kind of sad thing about that logic is that Sayaka inadvertently has kind of pushed herself into a corner where she can never be with Nanami, because what if she breaks Nanami's heart? She has to always be the white knight that's there whenever Nanami needs a shoulder to cry on, and in turn, that keeps Sayaka from being anything more than that. Sayaka's basically friend-zoned herself and seems okay with that, because if it means she can be Nanami's shoulder to cry on if she gets her heart broke, that's fine by her. And she's okay with that. But if I was you, I'd be like, oh shit, well, okay. All right. Thanks. Glad that you're going to be there if something happens. I also think that Yu doesn't fully realize what that statement means. She's just kind of like, well, that was an encounter. That woman's terrifying. Okay, what do I do now? And so she takes it quite literally and tries to go research the sister, but everything's been taken away. All the information has been purposefully taken so that people can't find out about her sister. And I don't know if it's just to keep you from finding out about it, or if it is to keep anybody from finding out. We don't exactly know. I do like the little moment where Kiyomi kind of looks over at Yu to try to see if she had read her manuscript or not. I like that Kiyomi is nice enough to not be like, hey, did you read it yet? Did you read it? Did you read that? But she keeps looking over like, maybe you did. Did you really? And so Yu inadvertently tells Kiyomi that she's really liked the manuscript and she would be up for her writing a screenplay if that's something she'd be interested in. And I like that Yu's like, okay, I don't want to say that we're doing it yet because we might not be, but at that point, if she mentions it to Kiyomi and puts the word in her mouth and plants the seeds, it kind of leads me to believe that Yu was expecting them to do the stage show, but she wanted to go talk to Nanami first. Like, she's like, I want to make sure that this is something Nanami really wants to do. That's the thing. She wants to make sure that Nanami is wanting all this. And I love that about Yu. Yu is like, I don't want Nanami to be doing this because she feels pressured to. I want her to feel like this is something she genuinely wants. But if she genuinely wants it, sure, I'll support it. But I want to make sure that's the case first, and she's not just doing this out of peer pressure. So, but she planted the seeds for Kiyomi anyway, so that to me is a sign that she at least somewhat thinks that it's going to be a thing that happens. So I don't know. Anyway, so she ends up trying to research more, and that's when the teacher tells her about the sister. Now, the moment that they said the sister died 7 years ago in a traffic accident, at that point, I was like, oh, is that going to come back in this series? We've had these creepy train signals and this train siren and all this blaring in the background that's been a sign of doom. Is the traffic accident going to be like something to do with a train or a car or something? Is it going to be something paralleled? I don't want that to happen. No, thank you. We'll see. I want to know what this conversation they were having before was, though, because like it's the dialogue from Nanami was, that's not true. That can't be true. And then she says, I feel for you. So I'm like, what were they talking about? It seemed like a very dramatic conversation. So the sister, Rei, that's Yu's sister, happens to know somebody that knew about Mio, who is Nanami's sister. And they're like, Mio was the older sister. And Yu's like, well, she said she had no siblings. And he's like, well, that's true now. Her sister passed away in a traffic accident. Now, to me, that line there does bear some significance because there is a difference of saying, oh, my sister passed away and she's not here anymore versus I have no siblings. Again, like Nanami getting rid of all the information about her sister, it's almost like she wants to assimilate. She wants to assimilate her sister's persona with herself. Because when she talks about finishing what her sister started, she doesn't ever mention her sister or her legacy or anything like that. So she's really, to me, not interested in necessarily completing her sister's lineage or legacy, rather than taking on that persona that people have pressured her into taking on and being like, fine, you want me to be my sister? You want me to be successful like her? You want me to be on student council? Fine, I'll do it, but I'm going to do it my way. And okay, I'll finish the stage show my sister didn't get to finish, but it's going to be my stage show, and I'm going to have an original story for it, and it's going to be Nanami, and that's going to be it. It's going to be Toko Nanami's and not Mio Nanami's. So I get that. I get the want for Nanami to want to take her sister's persona, apply it to herself, and make something new out of it. I think that would be, what else could you do? If you're like, if people are going to pressure me to be like her, fine, but I'm going to do it my way. That all makes sense. And so she wouldn't want to keep bringing up her sister, because then that would kind of prohibit that from happening. She was idolized by everyone. And she was really great student president in the center of everything. And when she died, the stage show was called off and nobody ever performed it again. Probably because it was probably one of those things where she died and they were like, let's not do the stage show. And then the year after they were like, oh, it's too soon. Let's not do that. That was her thing. And then it kind of snowballed into this, well, nobody ever picked it up again. And it just never made a comeback. And so he was like, oh, And she's like, well, that's not true. They were probably nothing alike. Senpai is far from perfect and she's timid on the inside. But since her sister died, she's been trying to imitate her. I used to be nothing and I can't go back to doing that. She ended up this way by trying to become what her sister had been. And that's when we go back to Sayaka's words. She's doing all this because she wants to and plans on keep going. But for how long? And I do appreciate that Yu is thinking of Nanami and being like, is this sustainable? Is this healthy? Are you happy? Do you want to do this? Or is it just because you feel obligated? Like, I appreciate Yu saying these things and voicing her opinions. She doesn't say all that she thinks, and so we're going to talk about what she keeps quiet, but I'm glad that she's considerate of her because, yeah, at some point, unless you have someone that you can be yourself around or an outlet to be yourself, you can't just be this persona all day long. It will drive you, it will become you, but that also might make you miserable. I also like that you is just so blunt. Like, she's just so blunt, and like Sayaka's right there, and Yu's like, hey, do you want to come walk home with me alone without your best friend? And Sayaka's like, face cracked. She's like, fine. I feel like Sayaka was fine with this because she thought it was probably going to cause some drama. And she's like, fine, let her have a conversation with her. Isn't going to hurt me. And I'm like, So this episode is called Words Kept Repressed and Words Used to Repress, which is interesting. So it's this idea of the things we keep bottled up inside of us. That's what's being repressed. And then what we use to keep it repressed. So these two, though, oh my God. And that train being a damn metaphor for like the divide between them. So they get to this really cute little stepping stone path. And I love the visual metaphor of, at first, when you think they're going to have a breakup. I thought they were going to have a breakup in this episode. I really did. But this is like the calm before the storm. For sure. There's gonna be trouble ahead. There's gonna be waving palm trees in the ED. There's gonna be problems ahead. I can see it because Nanami has in her mind of how Yu is, just like Yu has in her mind of how Nanami is, and I'm like, oh no. So it was patched up for now, but this episode I was like, oh, this is gonna get ugly for a little bit. Probably, isn't it? I'm sure. Before it gets better. I'm like, oh my God. Because I feel as if it started to get ugly and then they patched it up, and I was really glad because when you saw like that divide and you wasn't able to go further and Nanami was getting further and further away, I was like, are they gonna have a breakup? Is that what this is leading to? And it didn't, but so she just straight up says, you're trying to become like your sister, aren't you? And Yu's like, what? She's like, I asked the teacher about your sister and she told me. I'm sorry for prying. And Nanami's like, well, I figured there'd be people who still knew even though I tried to keep it hidden. I do like, I'm looking at Yu's uniform and all I can think of is the Nanami from Utena. From Revolutionary Girl Utena. Her outfit's similar, only more 90s. So then they start to go down the path. And Nanami's like, I'm going to finish what my sister never got the chance to. And that's the thing, too. The way that she words that, Nanami is like, my sister never got to do this play. So this play could be something that I take on myself and make my own. Maybe her sister didn't want to do the play. Maybe she didn't. And Nanami's like, this is my chance to take my sister's persona and then go beyond it in my own way and be myself. Maybe that's my chance to do that. And then she just keeps going down the path. Like, she keeps forging ahead. Like, you're not going to stop me. And it kind of reminds me, too, of Attack on Titan. Isn't that the weirdest thing? It reminds me a little bit of Attack on Titan because there's a character in that. I'm not going to spoil things. But there's a character in that series that is basically shoved into a position where they kind of have to adopt a persona. But somewhere along the way, they're like, screw it. I'm going to do things my way and take advantage of this situation and make it work for me. And I'll just keep forging ahead until I get what I want. And I was pushed into this position, but now I'm going to make it something that's my own, whether it's good or bad. And it's like, of course, in that series, there's a lot more dire stakes. Here, it's very much personal. But Yu is trying to understand what in the world to do with this information. And she's like, well, would you consider quitting? She's like, and Yu says, I think that it's better that you stay the way that you are. And so here's the thing. What Nanami doesn't want is that she does not want someone to push her to be a version of herself. Because she's basically saying, like, you know, when people fall in love, it's like, are you falling in love with me or a version of me? Which is it? Because a lot of times when you fall in love with someone, you don't fully know them at first. Like if it's love at first sight, this is what they are, but you don't know them all the way. You don't know all of their intricacies, all of their quirks, all of their flaws. So you fall in love with this image that you have, but that's not necessarily representative of that person. And there's a fear that once you get fully into the relationship with that person and you see the whole picture, the 360 view, you may decide that you don't like that anymore, or that's not what you expected, or, oh, this is too much, or whatever, or it's not the representation you thought it was. So when she says, I think you need to stay the way that you are, and Yu's coming from a place of kindness with this statement, being like, well, you should be yourself. You shouldn't be trying to put on a persona. You shouldn't be trying to be anybody but yourself. And then she comes down there and says, I think it's reasonable and respectable you want to become a person as great as your sister, which isn't a bad thing to say. And she's coming down to try to meet her at her level, but you're pushing yourself too hard to do it. And it makes me worry. You don't have to be someone else. I think there are more people than you realize who could accept the real you. And that all sounds great, right? She's like, that all sounds very idealistic. And I know there are people who will be fond of the real you as well. Because, and she doesn't finish the statement. And she's like, because I already know the real you and still want to be by your side. So the actual thoughts is that Yu's like, she's seen, quote unquote, the real Nanami and wants to be with that version. She's like, I've seen how you are and I want to be and I still want to stay by your side. And she like clenches her fist there and then says, I want to fall in love with you. And so she doesn't say I have fallen in love, but I want to fall in love with you. She's like, I've seen the other side of you and I like that version of you. And so I still want to fall in love. But she doesn't say it, which is probably a good thing because that's not what Nanami wants to hear. And then she's like, well, I would rather die than hear those words. And I was like, Wachong! Ah! Terrifying! The train goes by and it gets dark and that is utterly terrifying. And Yu's like, wait, what? What are we doing? But no. Nanami does not want to have to choose a quote-unquote side of herself. She's like, no, I don't want you to just like the real me or whatever, or the persona of me. She's like, no. And Yu's like, excuse me, what are we talking about? She's like, everyone loved my big sister. And I loved her too. And of course, she looked just exactly like her and she had the short hair. And I struggled to believe it when she died and I couldn't accept it. And so she had all this pressure put on her, which I always hate when family members are like, you need to be like your siblings. Keep your head up and live for your sister's sake. Live for the both of you. I'm like, well, what pressure? Like, why can't she just live for herself? Like, she's not her sister. I'm very glad that it's just me and my brother, because I always feel like if I had another sister or if there was another one of us, I'm like, I would hate for that. One of my friends from high school had an older sister that was perfect. She was great. She was like the perfect athlete. She was like the valedictorian, all of this. She didn't die, but the younger sister always had all this pressure of being like, well, why aren't you like your big sister? And why aren't you great at sports like her? And why aren't you this? And all throughout high school, she tried to do the same sports. She tried to be really great at school, but she wasn't her sister. And it was so hard as an outsider to watch how her family treated her because she wasn't as perfect as her big sister. It was like Olga and Helga from Hey Arnold. It was just really hard to watch. And at that moment in high school, I remember being like, I'm really glad I don't have a sister because that'd be really hard. And I just wouldn't want that, right? So I feel for Nanami. I feel for Nanami that she's got all this pressure. And they're like, become as outstanding as she was and do that for the both of you. And she genuinely, loves her sister and is kind of on board with this persona. She's like, I started to think about becoming a replacement for my sister. And she's like, when I adopted my sister's persona, everyone seemed happier. They even started to call me special. And I'll admit that it feels good to return to my real self in front of you, but I can't give up being special in front of everyone else. Yeah, she's at this point with how she is. Nanami's like, the feeling is too good, and I have too much riding on this. There's too many people that respect me now and have all of these impressions of me, and she's like, I can't just give that up, because then what? Then I'll be a fool, you know, for faking it and being something that I'm not. Like that, it's become part of her so long that it is a part of her now, and she's like, I don't want to give it up. Like, I'm glad that I can be myself around you, but I'm not going to give up this persona that I've adopted. And then she's like, I understand it makes you worried about me, but I'm sorry. This is part of who I am. We're doing the stage show. And regardless of whether you decide to participate or not. And at that point, I'm sure that Sayaka thought that's where it was going to end. I'm sure Sayaka thought, Yuu doesn't want to do the stage show. So whenever Nanami tells her that, she's going to move on. And then Sayaka will be there to pat Nanami's shoulder and be like, what? You knew better, and we'll just move on from here. Luckily, Yuu doesn't let that happen. But Nanami is like, this is who I am. This is me. And she's like, I know it's complicated. And she's like, I know it's flawed. But she's like, I'm persistent, and that's just how it's going to be. And if you don't want to be part of it, I'm not going to stop you. And she starts to like skip away. And then of course, and she's about to trip. Yuu is about to trip and fall into the river, and she stops herself. And when she stops herself, Nanami stops. But then she starts going again, moving forward, only slower this time. And Yuu's like, to be honest, I thought I would convince her. I like that at that moment, Yuu's like, I thought that was a pretty convincing speech. And the thing that I love about this series is, in any other series, that might be the speech to do it. Like at the climax of the second to last episode. But that is not how Bloom Into You works. And that is not, it's a lot more complicated than that. She's like, well, I thought that would have convinced her. But I know, because she's like, I know she doesn't want to leave my side, so I thought that would be enough. Basically, you thought that she could deliver this ultimatum. She's like, well, because she really likes me and wants me to stay with her, I thought I could give her this ultimatum to be herself, and that's all she had to do, and that was going to work. But that's not how Nanami is. Nanami's like, well, she's like, I still love you, but I'm not going to change who I am just because you told me to. And I really like that. I respect it, you know? So, and you could let her walk away. She could let her leave and skip away to the other side and let that divide her. But Yuu has decided that she's like, no, I want to chase after her. I want to go after her in this moment. But if I can't be with her, who else is there for me to learn to love? And Yuu is like, she's the only, I don't know how Nanami would feel about that statement, because Yuu is basically saying that right now Nanami is she's assimilated this demisexual response of saying that Nanami is the one. She's like, she's the only one that's okay with all of this and how I am. She's like, who else is there that I could learn to love from? I don't know how I feel about that line, if I'm being honest. I don't know how I feel about that line. If I can't be with her, who else is there for me to learn to love? Because on the one end, I don't think that Nanami should be there to teach you to love. And so that's problematic to me. But I understand that she's like, I'm kind of demisexual for Nanami, and I don't really know anyone else I feel remotely into other than her. And Nanami is the only one I know of so far that knows how I am and treats me, you know, without judgment. But I do think that there's like a part of that to where they need to talk about it and be like, look, Nanami's not there to teach you the ins and out of love. But at the same time, that's hard because she's the only one that kind of accepts you for who she is. So it's complicated. And that's when, just as Nanami, she's like, if you weren't lonely, you wouldn't be pursuing a relationship. And Nanami stops. She's like, even though you can't decide between your weak side and your perfect side, you still want to be with someone. And that person is me, right? And she's like, I can't fall in love with either side of you. She's like, I haven't yet, and I likely never will. I can't bring myself to feel that way about you. And Nanami just doesn't say anything before she turns around. She's like, so would you stay with me? And she's like, I told you, if you ask me to stay by your side, that's what I'll do. I need you to tell me that that is what you really want. And Nanami's like, I want you to help with the show. And she's like, okay. And she's like, what does she say there? She's like, I want you to help with the show. And Yuu was like, all right. She's like, be by my side. Yep, I can do that. And when I'm lonely, let me lean on you. She's like, yep, that seems fine. She's like, don't have feelings for anyone else. And don't let your feelings towards me become hatred. And so there's some things there. So Nanami is like, there's this thing where she says, don't hate me. Don't fall for other people. And be there for me. And help me out. And Yu's whole thing is that she's like, I can't love a version of you. She's like, I want to be with you, but I can't say I'll fall in love with, like, it's basically like in Family Matters, that show from the 90s where the main character Urkel had this other alter ego named like Stefan or Kel, and one was cool and one was a lot more like timid and nerdy. And the main character, Laura, she kind of fell in love with the nerd side, which is kind of like you falling in love with the inner introvert of Nanami. But both of these characters are the same person. It's just two different sides of them. And she's like, I can't, pick a version of you. There's one I like more, obviously, but I'm not going to sit here and choose one or the other. And that's kind of where Yuu is. Nanami, I'm going to say it, is really, really pushing that line hard. She's got it pretty damn lucky right now. Because she's like, oh, I found somebody that won't cheat on me, that won't get mad at me, that won't be jealous because they're not in love with me, but they're going to be someone that can be my forever person I can be lonely and lean on and ask for help and make out with wherever I want. I'm like, girl, you're having your cake and eating it too, aren't you? And it's like, oh, that's interesting. And Yuu just goes along with it. And she says, okay. And she says, and also Yuu, and I love that's where they meet in the middle. She's like, yes. And she says, please don't. And she doesn't finish that sentence. She says, just for today, let's hold hands while we walk. She's like, please don't fall. What she doesn't want to say is, please don't fall in love with me. And that's when they walk back hand in hand. And she's like, well, if that's what you want, sure. Doesn't bother me. And so as they're walking back, we get two different sides of the scene. We get Yu's side and we get Nanami's side. And Yu's like, well, this is a little bit embarrassing. And she's like, well, nobody's going to notice. And so then Yu's thinking about things. And that's when Nanami asks her, she tells her she loves her. And I love that Yu responds with, thank you very much. I'm going to start using that now. Love you. Thank you very much. And she's like, don't change the way that you are. And that's when Yu's like, but I want to change. And she's like, okay. She's like, the reason I lied to her was because I'm also lonely. And I want to find a way to love her. So Yuu is saying that she wants to find a way to fall in love with her because she's also lonely. So she wants to change. That's the thing. Nanami, I don't think Nanami realizes that Yuu is lonely and that Yuu has those feelings or is capable of feeling lonely like that. So, her saying, don't change who you are is, Nanami just got done giving a whole speech about how, you saying pick a side of you and stick with it. And she's like, that's the worst thing you could ever say to me. And yet in the same breath, she asks you not to change. And I'm like, girl, you're just asking her to do the same thing you said you'd rather die than do. And I don't think she realizes that. I think she's just taking for granted how you is to her face without realizing the real you. Nanami believes that you is so straightforward and so honest and very open like a book. Like she's so grounded and easy to read. Nanami doesn't realize that there's another side to you and doesn't realize how you really feels deep down. And I think that's going to come out at some point, and Nanami's going to have to deal with it and come to terms with how she really feels about that. So when we get past the ED to the end credits, we go back to this scene here where she's like, what does she talk about there? I'm going to go back to this one aspect because she talks about it as they're holding hands. She's like, no one's going to notice. And that's when she says, love is a violent word. And that's kind of where it starts, because Nanami is not a violent person, right? She's trying to avoid the whole thing of her adopting her sister's persona is a very non-confrontational approach, rather than her parents being like, be like your sister, and her being like, no, that's dumb, I'm my own person. She takes the non-violent, non-confrontational approach of being like, okay, sure, I'll just make it my own. I'll just passively aggressively take it on and do my own thing with it. But she does not want to be violent, and love to her is a violent state of being because it's not something that's perfect and flawless. She's like, love is a violent word. And so that's with all the letters where people are like, oh, that's why I really like you, Nanami. Meet me behind the gym after school. I'll be waiting. If someone loves us as we are, they would stop feeling that way if we suddenly changed, right? So she's afraid that change would end that love, which is going to be a whole world of hurt for her when she realizes that Yu's wanting to change and get in love with her. That's the last thing that she wants. She's like, if someone loved us as we are, then when she's like, love is a word that shackles us, which is so interesting. Love is it shackles us to remain the same or be a version of ourselves. She's like, because if you only loves the side of me that's not the perfect side, what if I end up liking the perfect side? What if those sides merge together? What if I become a different person? What if I change over time? The problem with, a lot of people say the problem with monogamous relationships is that over time you change as a person. And if that other partner isn't able to accept you as you change, that creates some problems. And it creates a problem with that relationship. And so Nanami's like, if I change over time and this person only loved me for who I was in that moment and they don't accept me for who I am as I change, then I'm being shackled into this existence that might not be a reflection of who I am anymore. And again, Heaven Official's blessing. The thing about Hua Chong and Shi Lian's relationship is that Shi Lian and Hua Chong are so complex, and they've known each other for like 800 years in that story. So it's been a while that they've come to accept that, yeah, we're going to change and be different people. And they go through different lifetimes in that story. But at the end of the day, they still love each other no matter what. So by the end of their journey, they realized all these different lifetimes that they've lived, and they've accepted that, and that they still love each other at the end of the day. And then so it works. But end of Heaven Official's blessing, spoilers. But for Nanami, she's like, she knows that Yu doesn't understand love. And that's what drew her. She's like, the reason I thought that you'd be so forgiving is precisely because you can't love. She's like, you accept. She's like, because she's like, you're an incredibly kind person and you accept every part of me and agree to stay by my side. And once I experienced that level of comfort, I could never go back to being alone again. So yeah, Nanami is completely taking advantage of this. She's like, oh, well, but what Nanami doesn't realize is that part of the reason that Yuu is so accepting of her is because she does love her. Like, Nanami believes that love is this one-sided thing that is only determinate on whether your persona matches up with what that other person wants. But that's not what true love is. And Yuu is actually coming at it from a much more true love scenario of, no, I love you despite all these versions of yourself. And Nanami can't realize that yet. And so it's such a problem. And so she's like, she's like, don't ever change. She's like, these words are shackles. Don't change the way that you are. And so it's such an irony that she's afraid of love, because love involves the risk that someone might leave you if you change. But then she tells you in the same breath, don't change who you are, shackling her to this relationship, because if you changes, that might mean that Nanami's not comfortable with it. Oh my gosh, she's like, never fall in love with me. Well, you know what's going to happen? Yu's going to fall in love with you, and then we're going to have to deal with that. So I feel like the story it's connecting not only Yuu coming to realize what love is and what true love is and how she feels about Nanami and how, the idea of accepting someone despite all the versions of themselves that are presented. And Nanami's going to have to learn that what Nanami thought was love was not actually love, or it wasn't a true love like what Yuu has for her. And I'm sure, I don't know if this series is going to go the melancholy route where it like ends on a bittersweet note where they're not together at the end, or they're like, oh, we can just be friends, or some bullshit like that. Or I want a romance that gives me a happy ending, damn it. But I also think that even if the show does give us a happy ending, it's about to put us through the ringer. This felt like storm clouds gathering, and like the temporary, like, oh no, everything's fine, when both of them I'm like, alert, alert, alert. Like, red flags are ahoy. So, oh my God. I really loved this episode, but it has me so nervous for the future episodes. So yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be great. Right? Sure. Yes, of course it will. Anyway. In any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'm back very soon with episode 7 of Bloom Into You.